Якщо кривот мейт май ицок шивет, ичита кривот та армиделок.
The end of the before brought more than simple death to Czet and its peoples. The histories that survive assert unanimously that the forest did not exist before the Serpentine, that the sudden appearance of the blasted heaths and unnatural woodlands were a product of the arrival of the comets. The forest itself is difficult to explain because it is not a single, unified thing. It is a biome, a space, and a living thing. At its edges, it is little different than the surrounding region, but the deeper one traverses into it, the stranger and more dangerous the landscape and biosphere becomes, leading into an alien landscape that is as deadly as it is unnatural. The forest is typically divided up into 3 depths by those insane, brave, or stupid enough to make regular trips into its borders. Its edges are called the periphery, and are the only region of the forest that can be considered any kind of safe. The periphery is not afflicted with the anomalous weather or reality-cracking events that the deeper regions are, although it bears the hallmarks of the forest, mutated fauna living amongst strange flora, under trees that seem more bone than wood. The second layer is called the transitory, and is where the forest begins to expose its true nature. Here the ground seems almost alive, the soil shifting and writhing underfoot, trees swaying in a wind that simply isn't there. The weather, too, begins to change, localized storms drenching regions in acrid water, or stabbing bolts of lightning into the ground from clouds that shift and reform without discernible reason. Stranger things, too, happen. Localized gravitational anomalies, crushing or throwing, splintering the ossuary trees, and obliterating the native wildlife. The very air sometimes seems to catch fire, scorching the landscape, leaving behind charred and blackened clearings, soon overtaken by the massive colonies of mushrooms that seem to cling to every surface. The last known layer is the core, and is utterly alien. The landscape here is one of broken bedrock and vile, twisting, living flesh. The land here bleeds, breathes, twitches and screams under a fungal canopy that blots out the sun. The trees here are not trees, but protrusions of bone, creaking and bending, clawing at an unseen sky. The anomalies experienced in the transitory region are pale imitations of that which occurs here, entire regions upended by instantaneous gravitic shifts, alongside temperature swings that snap from cryogenic to hot enough to melt lead, and strange chronological anomalies that defy explanation. The wildlife here is unrecognizable, writhing masses of flesh and bone and sinew that should not, according to the known laws of nature, be alive. The forest's threats are not just environmental. Aside from the anomalies, the monstrous wildlife, and the broken landscape, there are other things living in the forest. The Crochic word for them is pakorna, the taken. In old folklore, they were spoken of as spirits of the forest, guardians or wardens, keeping the peoples of Czet safe by keeping them out. Modern study has shown the truth is far less fanciful. The taken are people, or more accurately, were people. The cause for their change is not understood, but the end result is. Their bodies are broken, their flesh reformed like clay under a novice sculptor's hand. Long tendrils and tentacles extending from their pockmarked skin, mycelial colonies bursting from their backs, their heads and their limbs. They are universally hostile, and are the reason why most expeditions into the forest do not return, at least not in their original strength. Despite all this, there are pockets of civilization nestled within the forest. These folk are called the Chetak, inhabiting hidden villages beneath the underbrush or ensconced in centuries-old fortified cities, constructed before the forest had spread to surround them. These folk fight a constant battle for survival against the forest, either hiding or slashing and burning to hold back the fungal tide. There are things in the forest that make exploring it an attractive proposition, however. Aside from the promise of potential unearthed relics of the before, and the need to understand the exact nature of the forest, there are materials that can only be found deep within it. Formed by the anomalies that ravage the landscape, or the unknowable biological processes of the forest itself, dozens of unique metamaterials can be found scattered across the landscape. Shockingly energy-dense biomass, biocompatible bone fragments, strands of fiber able to sustain unmatched tensile stress, stone formations unaffected by gravity, the list goes on. For this reason, the forest is regularly subject to expeditions across the world, executed by military organizations, civilian research groups, and in some cases, religious orders seeking truths in the ossuary boughs of the forest. The most well-known organization to plumb the depths of the forest, however, is the Grup Tetka Aril, translated as the Dark Sky Unit, an unaligned paramilitary organization with funding from several major nations and branches scattered across the world. Of all the forces that explore the forest, the GDA are one of the very few specifically trained and equipped for expeditions into the transitory and core regions, although even they are known to suffer grievous losses on occasion. The largest reason for study, though, is that the forest is expanding, sometimes at a crawl, other times by leaps and bounds. Some regions have seen little more than a few dozen yards expansion over the last 2 centuries. Others have lost miles of ground in decades, only halting the expansion by constant slash-and-burn campaigns, aerial firebombing, and unceasing combat patrols to prevent excursions of the Taken. Despite this, most major powers see the forest as a secondary or even tertiary concern, their eyes turned outwards to their enemies rather than to their rear, where the very laws of reality are rewritten hour by hour. If nothing is done to slow or beat back the forest, some say, then there may come a day where it will not be able to be contained any longer.